You've just entered the Disaster Tough podcast, the place for emergency managers, first responders, and humanitarians who want to get the job done. Stories, lessons, and tips are provided by field experts. I'm your host, John Scardina, owner of Doberman Emergency Management and former federal emergency response official who's responded to some of the most extreme disasters. Disaster Tough is our mantra. It combines experience, training, and analytics in order to be successful at any stage within the disaster lifecycle. It means being a professional in emergency and disaster services. Doberman Emergency Management lives by this. If your organization needs to fill a gap, please contact us. We can help. Contact info is in the show notes. We also support other products and organizations that will increase your ability. For example, if you fight wildfires, hurricanes, a pandemic, any disaster in the field, at a hospital or command center, listen up. You're missing out if you do not use L3 Harris for your radio comms. They are secure, portable, mobile, and scalable, which is great news for us in the field. A truly disaster-tough radio system. Check out the XL family of radios by clicking on the show notes or simply go to l3harris.com. When you think of situational awareness, you need to think of Futurity IT. They are disaster tough because they saw a gap and figured out how to close it by creating the Orion and Athena applications. Situational awareness is all about speed, coordination, and accuracy of information. Futurity IT's Orion app collects and provides preliminary damage assessments and integrates all incident action plan documents with WebEOC. The Athena app allows for planning, contact tracing, and customizable group coordination in every single phase of the disaster lifecycle. The best part? Futurity IT made both applications extremely intuitive. It's so easy to use. Click on the show notes today to schedule a free demo.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's your host, John Scardina. And I am so excited to be talking to my good friend, Jack. He's back on the show. He's one of the most popular people who's ever been on here. As you guys all know, because you tuned into him and our viewers, exploded last time. And so we're expecting that to happen again because everything he has to say makes sense for emergency managers. If you recall last summer, we talked to him for a July 4th episode. He's a veteran and the guy has he's kind of seen it all. He was with the military, like I said, and then he moved on to emergency management, and he's really been influential there. And of course, he runs Gladiator Gunz now that does amazing training for, situational awareness and tactical response with firearms. And so he does, several courses there, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But Jack, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, thanks for having me, man. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be back, to have you back, rather. And so, a lot has happened between July and, let's say like the end of January. And so we just want to talk about, we've been on this kick here for a little bit, talking about 2021 potential threats and how to mitigate those threats. And of course, 2021 started off, the first 3 or 4 days were great. And then reality hit again. So we're still dealing with COVID. We're still dealing with, potential threat. But because your background really understands the man-made threats, we want to talk about that because I get a lot of questions. And shout out to those several Facebook groups who added me recently and asked questions about this, talking about Black Swan events and all that. But in terms of kind of the discussion of the day really is dealing with cascading events from whether it's civil unrest, like a peaceful protest that turns into a riot, or domestic terrorism. That's really important right now. DHS just came out with an assessment on Wednesday that said, they increased their threat level there. And so just from your background and working with all these different levels of security and response, the complexities of protecting high-level assets, and I'm talking about people, of course, and their buildings, like government buildings. What is your take of what's been happening this year, and what do you think we need to do as emergency managers as we prepare for the future?
Oh, man, that's a great question. That's a loaded question now. That's a loaded question. So
I hear guns pun. Yeah, loaded question.
Yeah. Need to come to training. But no, I think, like you said, man, those assessments, threat assessments, all those things that were just published, I think that's great material as far as for us as emergency managers, right? But if it's if it's information and we take it and we don't do anything with it, then it's not worth anything, right? So I think for us, for emergency managers, one of the first things, I'm not going to say the first thing, but one of the first things we should do when we receive this information is to, I don't want to use the word fact check it, but I want to make sure, hey, let's deep dive into it and see how this potentially can affect us, right? Because that information comes out and it's across the board, right? So it says, hey, these type of buildings, or, unless there's specific threats to those individual buildings. So let's just say if we work at building A and they say, hey, building A, we have credible information that there's going to be something happening at your building today, then that's different. But if it's just saying overall in the city, things may happen. So now we're put on notice, right? So at that point, I think one of the first things we need to do is bring in, depending on what your agency assets are, bring in those assets in the form of those leaders and say, hey guys, this is what we're looking at. Can we protect or defend whatever that situation may dictate? And if the answer is no, then now we start doing some legwork. If the answer is yes, we still start doing legwork, but now we start, okay, let's asset allocation. Okay, if we have this many, I don't know, this many police officers for our building, and the protest for, not trying to go, but if the event or the threat assessment says, hey, there's 60 guys coming to your building and you have 5 officers, well, then we're already at a deficit, right? So now we start to work and open those MOUs and MOAs with other agencies saying, hey, can we beg, borrow, and steal, or, so on and so forth. So I think that's the big thing for emergency managers. And what we talk about at our agency is that emergency managers are like, we're like for lack of a better word, we're like the plug, right? Like, we don't own anything. We just control, hey, you need something, I can get it from this guy to talk to this guy, and then we can put it together and we can make it work. But I think the relationship part of an emergency manager is super crucial. And I think that's something that's lacking for emergency managers, right? Because most of the time number one, we don't have a seat at the table, right? So things and decisions are being made around your organization, and us as subject matter experts aren't in the room to say, that doesn't make sense. We don't have that. We can do that. Hey, let me tell you about this other program that we can bring in, things of that nature. So
you just described my entire career. Yeah.
Hey, you and me.
I think
both,
a lot of people
bro.
are going to be shaking heads there. Yeah.
You and me both. So yeah, that's pretty much something like that.
I really like how you called it the plug. I've been calling it a coordinator. I say the greatest misnomer for our field is that we call ourselves managers. Like, first of all, I've been on this like big thing for a while about the meaning of words. Like, I don't use resiliency anymore. I use tough because I don't want to bounce back. I don't want to have to deal with the problem. And so like you talk about this plug, and my thought is, yeah, like we're really just trying to coordinate all the different pieces to make sure they're talking together to have the best possible outcome. I always think of mitigation like, okay, if I want to mitigate a flood, I'll put up sandbags, or if I want to mitigate, potential problem, I'll have levee systems, that kind of stuff. I don't really think about mitigating a problem based off of where human resources, as in not like the HR department, but like the people are at, and how to mitigate a problem just by getting them out of the situation. Right. I am all for, so I've said that I'm a pretty controversial guy because I'm all for protests. Like, if you want to protest, like whatever, it's not really my deal, but like whatever the topic is, you want to, you think the moon is made out of candy, whatever, go protest. I don't care. But as soon as you start endangering people, right, that's where the line is crossed for me. I don't care what the topic is, because that's like, that gets us closer to division. That gets us, that pulls away from a situational awareness and creates division. And that doesn't help out anybody. So yeah, like just like the events of this year alone, like as soon as people enter the Capitol with the flag of the enemy of the United States, as soon as they have that, the Confederate flag there, dude, traitor, like you're done. And so big shout out to our partners at FBI for finding that and calling that out. People who stayed outside the building, who didn't ramp that up, good for you for doing that. Protest whatever you like. You're stupid for that protest, but protest for whatever you like. Right. And that goes on for future events too. And I only see this escalating. The more and more our population gets used to like mass protests,
the more and more it's going to be common. Some issues are really important. You know, some issues it's like, hey, we got to bring awareness to this. And other issues, it's like, well, I'm just complaining about it and not trying to find a real solution here. No matter what it is, these events tend to escalate. And they tend to escalate when we are not trained very well in emergency management or our counterparts in first response, or there's agitators within that group who seek to create that division. And so you can talk forever about that, but that gets political real fast. But in terms of coordinating a multi-jurisdictional response, what'd you say, beg, steal, and borrow?
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second, because I brought this up to a couple different people now. On pretty much every single after action, we see the same dumb word that doesn't mean anything, and that's communication. Oh, we had a communication gap. Well, what did you mean by communication? Did you mean like your radio didn't work, or did you mean that you had poor relationships? And so can you talk to us more about, like you said, relationships are so critical. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so relationships, right? Relationships are there. I mean, the buzzword, like you said, is communication. But if you look at communication and you break it down, what is that? What is the core value of communication? Is talking to someone, like simple, plain and simple. Hey, can I talk from point A to point B if we're talking about equipment? Yes or no. But if we go back to the simplest form, to its earliest days, it's, hey, John, I'm Jack. I would like to come over and borrow your lawnmower to cut my grass. I don't have a lawnmower. Is that okay? Yeah, man, come on over and borrow it. Something simple as that. And then you build off of that, right? So, fast forward to current times right now, we have, and mind you, the COVID situation doesn't make it any easier for us as emergency managers, right? Because we were talking about it before off air, like there's so many of us that aren't even in the office, right? And I think that's a whole new, paradigm as far as being able to manage, emergency management from outside of the structure or outside of the office. Can it be done? Can it not be done? So that might be a good topic for you in one of your next, podcasts, emergency management from a virtual, arena. But
we'll get you back on here to do that.
No. Yeah. So communication, man, you have to be able to communicate. And we talk about it, we've coined the phrase, we as an emergency managers coined the phrase, hey, you don't want to be meeting somebody the first time in the middle of a disaster, right? Handing out your business card in a disaster. Those relationships have to be preemptive. You have to know who's in your jurisdiction. Hey, what assets are available to you and, you and your agency and so on and so forth. So, not trying to, harp on those agencies that were attacked and, all of those officers and, the facility, but I'm sure there was some type of, early warning notice. Hey, there's a high possibility that there may be a protest and it may turn violent. So
I can't even, okay, I'm going to stop you right there because I can't even imagine. I think, okay, I'm an emergency manager, so sometimes I think like I have like maybe I have a different perspective, but I think about 90% of the country was like, yeah, I could see something happening on January 6th.
Right.
So like, what? Like, I don't know, like, as soon as you ask people to come on like a high stress day or a highly political day, things can happen. And it's just poor planning. And the sad reality is a cop is dead. And now because another one committed suicide. And so it's like, and what, total 6 people now. And that's just sad, like you don't want that to happen. Yeah. Again, if you want to protest that the moon is made out of candy or that, drinking salt water is a good idea, go for it, man. You can be an idiot. But like, I don't know, it doesn't match reality. And as soon as you put people or things in harm's way, like that hazard vulnerability assessment we talk about, like big no. Yeah. I like how you said like bring it back to the basics because like COVID has made it really hard for like interpersonal communication and like relationship building. So what do you do?
So COVID did a couple things, right? So for me personally, I'm gonna just speak for me, not for my agents, not just this is Jack speaking. Yeah. COVID highlighted deficiencies in everything we do on our day-to-day life, number one, right? as an individual, and then going into your business, emergency managers, structures and organizations. It highlighted so many different things. And I think we talked about this on the last podcast, but it highlighted so many different areas that needed improvement or gaps in capability, so on and so forth. So I think it allowed us to be more prepared moving forward, right? Because we identified, hey, we don't have enough toilet paper in the building if something happens. Well, you know what? Let's overstock on toilet paper or stock up on toilet paper. So it provided us the opportunity to take a hard look in the mirror and say, you know what? We are ill prepared for this. And if it prolongs or anything like this happens again, we're still ill prepared. So now let's build plan systems, all of those things, or dust off plans that we have on the shelf, and let's figure out what it looks like moving forward. So I think from an individual and an agency standpoint, I think COVID was a great thing for that respect. Obviously, the people dying and all that other stuff, and the ill handling of things, however you look at it, whatever side of the fence you're on, that's obviously a negative. But communication, man, so for me, one of the biggest things for my job is I do, I don't want to use the word outreach, but I do partnership building with other agencies, whether it's in our jurisdiction or in our immediate area, or it's out of state, other jurisdictions. So for me, that was hard, right? So I'm a face-to-face guy. Hey, man, I need to go see, Joe in Minnesota. I'm flying to Minnesota. I'm gonna go talk to Joe, but I couldn't do those things. So for me, it was a little difficult. So it made me have to find out other ways to communicate, which was Zoom, which was all these other different platforms, and make those connections. And for some people, it's a little harder, right? They're more interpersonal and they're more reserved. So for me, I'm outgoing. Hey, man, I'm in your face. Let's talk. So it allowed me to get out and meet these other individuals virtually. So I think that was cool. But again, it opened up another source of, opened up another resource that we have. Now we have Zoom. So now people can see, hey, you know what? We can host and talk and have training meetings and all these other different things over Zoom. We don't always have to be in the same location. So I think it was a benefit. Communication, it doesn't stop, right? Communication is not going to stop because the incident or whatever's going on is going on. You still have to communicate. You have to figure out ways. In the military, we had this thing called a PACE plan, right? Which stands for primary, alternate, contingent, and emergency plan. So you go down the line, once those things run out, what's next, right? Like, am I sending a pigeon to wherever, you know what I mean, with a note strapped to his heel? Whatever it is, it has to work. You can't stop and not communicate because the incident or the event's happening.
Okay, there's said really important things there, but the only thing I can think of right now is the fact that when we were in Georgetown, we learned that there's $100,000 like pigeons that people buy, and I still can't imagine why anybody would spend $100,000 on a pigeon. Freaking A.
Those are some good days too. Those are some good times.
Those are some good times, man. Talk about face to face, man. So for those who don't know, like Georgetown's master's program, dude, they better sponsor me because I'm always talking them up. But like we would go out and we would look at different areas around the country, or even an international perspective of, and when you go out there to study for a week, and man, I've already had several people from the program like on this show, and of course you, and Jack and I had we had like season tickets to Georgetown basketball. It was a lot of fun, like, and it shows that years later those relationships matter. Like, I talk about this thing in our active shooter class called "There's no such thing as not my problem." Like, if you notice somebody's behavior is dramatically changing, and they're having like major stresses, especially if they're bringing them into work, like, oh my gosh, this guy's ex-husband showed up again and was like screaming outside the office. Like, that's not a time to be like, yeah, screw that. Some people try to ignore it, but like, hey, are you okay? And reducing threat that way. And so, like, anytime you can create a relationship with somebody, do it. Like, don't burn bridges. And a testament to that is like, I'm kind of a controversial person in general, but for the people that I can keep hold, I try to, because years later we can have a cool conversation about this and talk about what we're all doing. And communication is everything, though. I like how you said, like, there's some silver linings in COVID. Like, so many people focus on like the bad of COVID, and there is real problems there.
but there's so many lessons learned. You talk about the next 10, 15 years of like after actions that are going to come out and case studies of, if somebody would have said, this is like my fun one, like to use, not fun, but if you said in 2019, let's put every kid in America at home for a year for school and see what it does for education and their psychological development, like, duh, nobody would like, what a horrible idea. No one's going to go for that. But so there's all these other case studies that the pandemic provided to show, like, okay, this is why kids need to be in school. This is what they can do online. Does homework really matter? And like all these different ways that we're attacking our system that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do before, and clearly defining our deficiencies. It's really hard to know what your deficiencies are. You don't know what you don't know, you know?
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Yeah. So I got to ask though, because for those who are watching the YouTube video, you can see it, but those who are on the audio cannot. Jack has this really cool display behind him. He's has some of the firearms, but really he has that logo of Gladiator Gunz. And you talk about communications. You talk about protecting assets. Let's just talk about like what you do for your business a little bit and how that applies to emergency managers. Because I think you probably focus more on like the first responders, but the training's available to anybody, obviously. And so there's a lot of gray area of what emergency managers should do because of FEMA being in DHS and graying the lines behind a law enforcement and like humanitarian work. You hear about firefighters now carrying weapons for safety. And so there's a lot of implications there. So like, let's talk about first what your business is, and then can you talk about why you decided to do your Gladiator Gunz?
Sure. So again, I mean, there was a lot of nuggets of wisdom that you were just dropping, just for the record. So
dropping bombs over here.
Much appreciated. So we're Gladiator Gunz Training Group. We're a small disabled veteran-owned business, and we're based out of New Brunswick, Texas. And our whole mission is to provide training to law enforcement, military, or civilian responsible legal gun owners that helps them be better prepared for whatever situation that may be. So we do that in a variety of different ways. We offer a variety of different classes. We offer everything from basic, hey, I just bought my first pistol, or I bought my first rifle. What do I do with it? To, hey, I'm on a SWAT team, and we're doing, building entries and, things of that nature. So we can kind of facilitate anywhere in that spectrum. And the reason why we started the business, it kind of stems back to prior to my government service when I was in the military, and I tell this story. So at my agency, I started when I initially retired, started working, and we, just like every other agency, you do active shooter training, right? So we did an active shooter training one day, and my options that they gave me were not conducive to my survival in my mind, based off of where I just came from for the past 20 years. So, and there's nothing wrong with the program that they had initially, which was, they wanted to do the typical, shelter in place lockdown type thing. So for me, that didn't sit very well, because I'm more of a, hey, proactive guy, especially when it comes to my survival. I don't want to be basing it on whatever somebody else will or won't do. So long story short, went out and found another program, got certified in this program, then started teaching the program, and we implemented that program at my agency and other agencies in the area for Department of Defense. So I took that same mentality and said, you know what? How can we help people be better, right? Like, I had all of this experience from the military, and now being in my current position for the past 6 years, like, how do I bridge the gap for regular everyday people, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that we learn in the military, do training, and as far as in Department of Defense government, work that you learn that is still applicable to your everyday lifestyle people. So I said, hey, let's create a company, or let's create a business plan and business model that says, hey, we can teach people to be better prepared. And we do it from, like I said, we do firearms. So we have this thing. Let me talk about that real quick. So we have this. Our whole motto for our company is discomfort is the breeding ground for confidence. Right. That's our company motto.
Awesome.
And so we have what we call the total shooter concept, and this is like G5 classified. Like you're getting first hand account of this, right?
Everybody should be
So
paying attention right now. Yeah.
right. Get your tape decks ready. So our total shooter concept bridges four different aspects, right? So we take the shooting aspect of readiness, right? So you need to know how to defend yourself with whatever it is, whether firearm, you know, whatever that object is. Then we take the physical, right? So you need to have some type of physical ability or physical fitness. You can't, run from here to the steps. How are you going to run from here to the car if whatever, right? So some physical fitness. Then you have to have mindset, right? So you have to have the mentality to be committed to whatever your action is. Then lastly, we talk about the medical training, right? Far and few between people are focusing on medical. Everybody wants to learn how to shoot. Everybody wants to learn, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and all these other cool things, which is great. But the probability of you driving home and there's a car accident, right? And the dude's, legs broken in half, he has an open femur fracture and blood's coming out. Probably should use a tourniquet, right? So we bridge all those gaps together, and we came up with our total shooter concept, and we build our training program off of those different concepts. So for us, it's been successful. We've been going strong for going on year number 2 now. We've trained everybody from SWAT dudes to undercover narcotics guys to your single mom, your first day shooter, to just average competition shooters and anywhere in between, right? So it's been good. We've seen a lot of different faces. We've had a lot of reoccurring students, and then we've had some success stories in the training, right? Just recently, I can't really talk about it yet, but we've had some officers get into gunfights and attributed some of their survival to some of the training that they
Amazing.
took with us. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty good thing.
I'm all for training. I had a conversation years ago with somebody who was against pilots getting firearm training. And I was like, what you're talking about is the ability to protect yourself. You don't want somebody to have the training to do that properly. And my question at the time, and I've kind of looked this up a lot since then, is how many police officers have an accidental or suicidal event at their house with their children? Because children kill themselves with guns all the time. They play with guns and they kill themselves, and it's really sad. But how many police officers? It's almost zero. As in not 0%, but 0 cases. Because police officers, law enforcement officers get training on how to store firearms. Every single police officer in America has a firearm. Every single one receives some level of training. They can receive more through Gladiator Gunz Training Group. So big shout out there. But they receive some level of training. And so I'm a big fan of training. So no matter what you do, learning from experts of how to do it right. You're talking about being committed to action. And that's a big thing in our active shooter class, going back to that active shooter class, is like we focus more on the civilian population that doesn't have firearms. And so like, what do you do? Run, hide, fight. And run, hide, fight is so basic. It doesn't even like address like most of what you should actually be doing. And so we just dive deep into each one of those. And the entire purpose of my conversation with them is like, I hope that you'll never need this, but if you do, it is the best thing that you'll ever get, to be able to protect yourself and to live. You also talk about the medical side. Really funny. A couple of years ago, I was riding home on my motorcycle on the highway, and there's an accident that happened right in front of me. Cars just slammed together. I pulled over. I started addressing the situation, checked on both drivers. I ended up doing an assessment on one of them while the other one was calling the ambulance and stabilized them, their neck. And I can't even tell you how many people asked me, especially the officers when they got there, what were you doing with your motorcycle that caused this accident? I'm like, dude, I was not in this. And so I don't know, so we're like putting the guy on a cart for the ambulance, and he's like literally laying there like,
hey, thanks, bro. And then he's looking over at the cop. Yeah, he wasn't involved, man. Like, the other dude hit me. Like, I was behind the scene, man.
Right.
So, shout out for motorcyclists. You're not always the bad guy. Freaking jerk. But I'm
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
So I just wanted to make a comment on what you said, right? Just talking about training. So if we look at it like from emergency management perspective, right? Because the importance of training, talking about the importance of training. So, like I know, there used to be this thing that FEMA used to say, the first 72 is on you, right? And for those that don't know what we're talking about, it's basically saying that in the event of a accident or an emergency in your area, you need to have at least 72 hours worth of supplies and sustainability for you and your family, right? So the same concept and the same principle holds true to training for any other weapon, firearm, whatever, right? How are you going to be able to properly, plan for, a weather disaster, right? And you lose you lose power for, 6 days. Well, those first 72 hours, in theory, at once upon a time, you should be able to prepare for those and deal with it. It's no different than getting training like you're just talking about an active shooter, right? We plan for the worst, but hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
If we're trained how to respond to and all those other buzzwords, recover from all those things, it makes it that much easier and one less thing we have to focus on and think about in training or in a real world situation because we have the training, right? We talk about this in our classes. When I teach, we talk about this thing called we talk about muscle memory. I'm not a big proponent of the word muscle memory because your muscles don't have brains, but that's neither here nor there. That's an argument that can go on forever, right?
Neurological connections to muscles,
right? The neurological pathways, right? So myelination is the buzzword for it, right? So if we talk about it in class, that if I'm teaching you something and you've only done it one time, then your mental capacity and your mental Rolodex or your mental file cabinet, you only have one file in there to say, hey, I got to search through all of this stuff to find this one sheet of paper or this one training or aspect that I've done to pull from that's going to help me be successful. Well, if you've done it over and over and over, you have a large card catalog. I'm kind of dating myself now, calling it card catalog. You have a large card catalog that you can pull from that has repetition over top of repetition over top of repetition. So instead of going down it slowly and cautiously, that road that you initially walked down that was this wide the first time you did it, now you have a 6-lane highway that you're flying through there and you're not even thinking, your subconscious competence making things happen. But anyway, sorry.
No,
I'm about to start educating, but you get my point. Training is crucial. Training is a crucial thing in everything we do, right? So one more example, right? Like when you get the new fire stick, right? You get the fire stick. Nobody picks up a fire stick and like turns it on and starts working Amazon or whatever you're going, right?
I had no idea what you meant by fire stick, and now Amazon.
Right.
The TV, got it.
Yeah. So Amazon, shout out to Amazon. Let's send some fire sticks
sponsor our show.
To the station. Yeah. So you get it and you hand it to somebody who's never used it. They're looking at it like it's a foreign object from another country or another planet. And you're like, how do I use this thing? And they start tinkering with it. But after time and time of working with it, training, repetition, they can start surfing and doing everything, and it makes it so much easier, right? So training is crucial. You got to train, guys. Gladiator Gunz Training Group.
Dude, I'm gonna make that a clip, and I'll send it right over to you so you can put on the show. But I like the thought process of you fight like you train like you fight. And the one caveat I would say on there is emergency managers always like to come up with training that like nobody knows about. Like every single event, it's like, oh, you can't have any preparation. Like boom, bomb hit, or there's a flood all of a sudden. Nobody saw the storm coming. Like what? I would change that a little bit. Now you should train for events that there's immediate onset. And what I mean, I'm not talking about a hurricane immediate onset. I'm talking about like Black Swan. Like, okay, you can train for that. However, like most incidents you can see coming. If I'm on a road on my motorcycle, man, my head is on a swivel constantly. I'm looking for objects in the road. I'm looking for other cars. I'm looking at my space, and this is a motorcycle training course, but like the same concept applies, right? And so you can put that in your training. You can say, okay, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about a 3-county flood in our state. We're going to be talking about the mobile home park just down the road got hit by a tornado. What do we do? And allowing people to have both a little bit of a heads up. Hey, this is what we're going to be doing, and to have experts come in there and say this is what you should do first, instead of people just guessing. But then it's really, really critical to actually go there and do it yourself. Okay, this is what's happening. This is what's going to happen. This is what you should do. This is how you should do it. And now you do it. And having experts guide that. I haven't taken your course yet. And I said I wanted to take it last summer. I'm still very serious about that. In fact, not a gun guy myself. Hilarious. I finally, like a week ago, got my hunter safety course. Just did that. Just as a really basic. My dad's like probably dying inside because my dad was a marksman. He taught me how to use a firearm, and so I've had a ton of training from him. But outside of that, I haven't used firearms. And so I was like, I want to start from the ground up. What do I do if I want to go hunting? How do I do that? And then I want to go to your courses. In fact, I asked you several months ago. Embarrassing for me. I asked you several months ago which firearm I should get, and you suggested some options. So maybe we can put that in the show notes or something. But like
you're in Cali, right? You're in Cali, right?
Yeah, I'm in Cali.
So we'll be in Arizona April 24th and 25th in Phoenix. That's kind of close to you. I'm just saying.
That's like a day drive for me. Just saying. So
okay.
We should do an episode like at your training course. That'd be awesome. Dude, I'm in. April 24th and oh no! April 24th and 25th? No, you should do it like a few days earlier than that.
September 25th and 26th.
Okay, I'm in. I'll put that on my calendar.
Arizona.
I have a commitment already for April 25th.
Okay.
But yeah, dude. September. Dude, send me the details afterwards. I'm in. I'm all in.
Okay. For sure.
So, and that again, because you're like a really close friend of mine, and everybody knows that you're a cool dude. If you want to take one of Jack's training courses with Gladiator Gunz Training Group, we're going to put a link to the training course in our show notes. So just go to the show notes on the podcast. We'll also put under the YouTube video for a little thing there. Again, just to say thanks for coming on the show, and maybe you can get some people joining in there. So.
Cool,
yeah,
man.
just thanks for that.
Appreciate it.
Let's talk about we talked about the training, we talked about kind of the whys and the what. Let's finish off with talking about the gray, because there is gray within using firearms for emergency managers. It's not all pros. You want to protect yourself. We get that. However, like that first 72 on you concept, there's a lot of organizations and general public who look at emergency managers and say, okay, I hear emergency. That means you're the law enforcement guy and you're the fire guy. Like you're going to go over to the fire hose and turn it on, right? There's a fire. Or if there's an active shooter, you're going to go over there and you're going to kill the guy, right? Clearly that's a misnomer, or that's a little off there. As a guy who's a veteran who implemented not just the defense side of it, but saying, okay, I'm gonna repel threat. You have a ton of experience in training. For the other emergency managers out there, guys who went to college for it, who never dealt with an active assailant, what do you say to them, and what do you think the organizations should do? What are the pros and cons there for having firearms for emergency managers?
Wow, man, that's a loaded question, man.
Boom. Sorry.
so I really, I think there's good and bad in it, right? It has its place and its benefits. But I also think it could do more harm than good if there's not strict guidance and training requirements and a bunch of other fail safes in there, to the point to where if the emergency manager has to present, attack the threat, so on and so forth, then we might have missed some things prior to that, right? So but if it gets to that point, right, so to your question, us having to use them, then I think I don't see anything wrong with an emergency manager being trained as a auxiliary piece to a law enforcement or protection asset to do that, but I don't think the emergency manager can serve his or her role as managing the incident if you're in the middle of
Love
whatever
that.
that incident is, right? Like you
Yeah.
can't be in two places at one time. I'd love to get behind a gun and clear wall corners and doors and do all those cool things with my
Diamond
LE,
formation. Yeah.
yeah, with my LE counterparts. But if I'm doing that, then who's the one, like we talked about earlier, being the plug, letting them know, hey, we have, this local asset coming to help. They're going to come in through this doorway and they're going to meet you on this. Like, who's doing that? Who's coordinating and managing? You can't do both. So I say if you're going to do it, it's cool to have it as a backup. Let's just say worst case scenario, your agency is attacked by like 50, like Red Dawn or something, right? Like you're attacked by a whole
North
army.
Korea. Yeah.
Right. Like there's no other option. Like you're not managing, you're just trying to survive right now. So then, yeah, maybe then. But I think trying to manage and participate, it's going to be kind of difficult. Not saying it can't be done. I don't know. Maybe if you have a team of emergency managers or emergency management section where, like we have a section where we can say, hey, you other individuals are going to do this. Will you go bounce and you go connect with law enforcement and you fill in wherever they need you, whatever type thing. So it's all situation dependent, but I think it would be cool to
I think you're
have that training.
I think you're onto it right there. That's why we have security staff. Like you train a staff to be able to do that tactical level response. Emergency manager is served best by having the strategic level response. My personal opinion, I've asked a lot of people actually. I've asked you now twice, kind of differently both times.
Did my answer change? Did my answer
nope.
kind of?
Well,
okay,
I asked you different. I asked you different questions, but
just
around
gotta be
the same topic.
consistent, right? Like, you gotta be consistent.
No, well, your answer hasn't changed. I asked different questions within the same topic, and I've asked like humanitarians. I've asked a USAR. We had a USAR expert on here. Asked military vets, all kinds of deal. Firefighters. I've asked a lot of people on the show their question. I've kind of held back on my. Yeah.
Real quick, you can't just say USAR and let that go across. Like we know what it means, but some people don't. But the point is, you also have to let your listeners know that we did USAR training in London.
That's right, we did, and I brought that up. So that's a double-edged sword. I've had a USAR guy on here twice. So if you don't know what USAR is, you suck. But if you're new and you don't know what USAR is, you're fine. Yeah, urban search and rescue, and it's different from search and rescue. They have different functions. Basically, one's within a collapsed city environment, and the other one's looking for whether it's cadaver or a persons of interest. So, but yeah, Jack and I in the Fire Service College in England did some urban search and rescue training. I learned that I don't like confined spaces. And I also learned that our very big firefighter buddies in the program should not be doing it, but they were doing it. So.
Those are good times, man.
Yeah. So here's my personal opinion on it. Like I said, I've held back for a while. My personal opinion is you're a target by putting an agency on your chest. As soon as you wear something, you're a target. You're also a target because it's like saying you work at the CIA. You could be an accountant. You could be, doing maintenance. But saying you work at the CIA, that puts you as a target. So, like, my thought process is you want the training and you need the training because at the end of the day, our level of situational awareness has to be raised because of our field. Mm-hmm. I would say that you're least effective by responding yourself. At the same time, if a guy's going to come into my office building, I'm not going to wait for law enforcement to get there. If there's immediate threat to my life, I'm going to take care of that threat, and you better believe I'm going to take care of that threat. So, and that's based off of the training I've received, right? Like I've taken all the active shooter classes. I now teach it. I've been in active assailant events. I have informal training from my father that served me very, very well when I was presented with an immediate threat that was 6 inches away from me, 10 years ago, and had several events happen because of that. And everybody thought I had all this formal training, but I was successful because I had really done the parts well. Thanks, Dad. But like
there's a whole level there. There's a whole level of incident management. And my thought process there is, once law enforcement arrive on the scene, and you're the guy in a flannel shirt holding the bad guy's gun, they're going to shoot you. You know, you don't want to be holding the gun when law enforcement comes barreling through, and their level of anxiety is through the roof, and most of them don't have extreme training with this, and so, you know, they're focusing on all fibers there, and anything can be perceived as a weapon. So that's my thought process. Kind of like that, like good for personal training. Only do it if it's life saving for yourself, and you can be more effective if you're coordinating with all the other agencies once they get on scene.
Agreed.
Yeah. Did you see the movie Run, Hide, Fight?
The actual DHS.
No. There's a movie that came out. Dude, it's horrible. Well, I can't say it's horrible because that's just too much. It's kind of ridiculous. There's like 5 kids who storm a high school, and they take it over, and this girl who went hunting one time is able to take them all out, and they're all able to think cognitively. There's no you know, gaze going on. It's kind of a weird movie. It's not really realistic, but it does call out one really important thing of like, you know, these active shooters are there to hurt you, and that's like the only objective. Body count. This is getting real dark real fast. But either way, Jack, like, thanks for coming on the show again and talking about threat and coordination and training. And of course, I've already said like so many times, Jack didn't pay me to say this. I'm just kind of hoping that he gets some work. Like, we get work at the Department of Emergency Management Group, and so if you need a contractor, if you need somebody to come in and do training or emergency plans, have an expert come in there. We can help you out. And if you need firearms training, you want that personal protection because you recognize you're a target, or you're in law enforcement, military, and you know you need additional training. You want to apply that to your specific work. Go to Gladiator Gunz Training Group. Again, it'll be in the show notes. You can click on that. Hopefully you can sign up for one of their courses. Maybe I'll see you there in September. And yeah, thanks again, Jack, for coming on the show.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for, you know, choosing me to come back on. Thank you to your listeners. Hopefully you guys got something out of this, and continue to support, man. And, you know, whether you're an emergency manager or you're just an everyday person, man, don't take training as, hey, just, you know, willy-nilly. Like, if you're a regular everyday person, look to your local CERT teams and your local assets to see where you can go get stop the bleed training, or where you can go get, you know, basic first aid and CPR, because all of these things matter, right? No matter what happens, we talk about it, and I know he needs to go. We need to cut the show off, and I'm gonna stop here. But no matter what happens, the word first responder is the person or individuals closest to the incident. So stop thinking, hey, you know, like he said, that law enforcement is going to come turn the water off, or, you know, put the fire out while you're in the house in the middle of the fire. Like, start planning to prepare to defend yourself and protect yourself. And then, oh, by the way, somebody's going to come finish what you start. So that's my 2 cents on it.
That's awesome. Thanks again, Jack, for coming on. If you liked our episode, of course, the big shout out here is to give us that 5-star rating and subscribe. If you're on one of our YouTube subscribers now, make sure you're doing that and like this episode. You can leave a comment for Jack in a couple different ways. Of course, everybody likes to send me emails. I love the emails at info@dobermanemg.com. However, we also do have an Instagram account, Disaster Tough Podcast, and you can put something in the YouTube video if you're watching the YouTube video. But again, if you want to talk to Jack directly or through us, follow the Instagram page, Disaster Tough Podcast, and make sure you subscribe. Thanks.